Russian missiles hit the Ukrainian city of Sumy on Sunday, killing dozens of people, making it the deadliest attack in Ukraine so far this year. Local officials said the strikes killed more than 30 people, including children, and injured more than 80. According to Ukrainian Economy Minister Yulia Sviridenko, the strikes hit the city centre as residents were attending church services for Palm Sunday. President Volodymyr Zelensky said the attack showed how Russia is, quote, dragging out this war and called for a strong response.
A Russian drone strike has injured at least 7 people in Odessa, Ukraine. The attack damaged civilian infrastructure and a medical facility as firefighters are now battling multiple blazes across the city. Now, this comes after Ukraine suffered the single deadliest Russian attack since 2023 on Palm Sunday. 2 ballistic missiles hit the northern city of Sumy, leaving at least 34 people dead and more than 100 injured. President Trump says he was told Russia, quote, made a mistake following the strike on crowded residential areas. But in an attempt to push Ukrainian forces further from the border of Russia's Kursk region, the Kremlin is clearly intensifying its aggression in the north. Joining me now live from London is CNN's Salma Abdelaziz. Good to see you, Salma. So what more are you learning about these Russian missile attacks on the city of Sumy and, of course, their aftermath?
What's particularly horrifying about these attacks, Rosemary, is that Ukrainian officials are accusing Russia of deliberately targeting civilians. Ukraine saying that Russia knew it was Palm Sunday, knew that the city center of Sumy would be busy, and that is why they struck. According to Ukrainian officials, also cluster munitions were used. You'll remember, of course, that these are munitions that are packed with lots of tiny explosives that could spread out across the size of a football field and can present many dangers later on. One military official describing this as a 2-pronged attack, saying the second of the 2 missiles likely filled with munitions that exploded mid-air to inflict maximum damage. President Zelensky shared images of the aftermath of this attack, which are absolutely nightmarish. Rosemary, you can see bodies strewn about in the streets, people screaming as rescue workers try to respond to these multiple incidences. And President Zelensky was quick to turn to President Trump's peace efforts and point to President Putin as a bad faith actor. Take a listen to how he put it.
Wars end only when criminal wars are not forgotten and when there is a pressure on the aggressor. This is not happening now. Last Friday, 1 month had passed since Russia rejected the American proposal of a full, unconditional ceasefire. They feel no fear, and that's why there are missiles. That's why there are 100 combat drones each night.
Now, President Trump has said repeatedly that he wants to see this war end and quickly. His negotiators were actually in Russia just a few days ago, speaking directly to President Putin. But for President Zelensky and the people of Sumy, those peace negotiations seem very far from the reality on the ground, which is an intensification of attacks by Moscow. As you mentioned, the Sumy region is right up near the border where Russian troops are trying to regain and seize territory from Ukrainian forces. So you're seeing more attacks, more hits and strikes at the Sumy region. President Zelensky was also in an interview yesterday asking President Trump to come to Ukraine and see this for himself. He is urging American negotiators essentially to really take a look and assess the damage that you see there at Sumy and really make a measurement of President Putin's intentions and efforts in these talks.
Thanks to Salma Abdelaziz joining us live there from London with that report. Appreciate it.
Mourners in the Ukrainian city of Sumy are paying tribute to the victims of yesterday's Russian missile attack. At least 34 people were killed and dozens more injured as people gathered for Palm Sunday services. It is the deadliest attack this year.
And joining us now, CNN Chief National Security Correspondent Alex Marquardt. Alex, Russia launched this attack, just days after the special U.S. envoy actually met with Vladimir Putin.
2 days. Steve Witkoff, the special envoy for Trump, met with Putin for 4 hours on Friday. That was the same day that Trump himself said that Russia had to get moving on a peace deal with Ukraine. And then we see this horrific attack. More than 30 people killed in Sumy, more than 100 injured in what's called a double tap. So 2 back-to-back strikes using ballistic and cluster munitions. So just a horrific attack. And the big question now, I think, guys, is whether Trump realizes that his time frame, his timeline for a peace deal in Ukraine is different than Vladimir Putin's. We have heard from President Trump essentially giving Putin the benefit of the doubt, saying that he heard that this was a mistake. But regardless of the target, this certainly was not a mistake. This is something that Putin has been doing for more than 3 years. Some people around Trump taking a tougher line, including his Ukraine envoy, Keith Kellogg, who said that this crosses any line of decency. But that big question, whether those around Trump can convince him that Putin may not be interested in peace right now.
Yeah, it's interesting. So you say Trump said, look, this was a mistake, giving Russia a benefit of the doubt, but cluster munitions are indiscriminate, right?
They are absolutely indiscriminate. And apparently what happened, according to the Ukrainians, is that they fired, the second missile came in and fired above the ground. And so that shrapnel would have gone everywhere. And to the point about narratives, we heard some very sharp words from President Zelensky this weekend as well, saying that he's growing frustrated, essentially, that the Russian narrative is taking hold. The Russians essentially saying, well, we were provoked. We didn't start this war. And this is something that we've started to hear more and more from those in and around the administration. We saw that fight breaking out essentially in the Oval Office. When President Vance went after President Zelensky, and we did hear some words directed by President Zelensky at Vice President Vance in a 60 Minutes interview that aired yesterday. Let's take a listen.
I don't want to engage in the altered reality that is being presented to me. First and foremost, we did not launch an attack to start the war. It seems to me that the Vice President is somehow justifying Putin's actions.
So does that jab at Vice President Vance reignite some of these frustrations between the two? That remains to be seen. But I do think the bigger question is whether this attack is an inflection point, whether it will really drive home the point that Putin right now is not looking for a peace deal.
Yeah, very, very disturbing. And kids were killed in that last attack.
Several, yes.
Several children. All right. Thanks very much, Alex Marquardt.